welcome you back to Newsmax Now. A number of developing stories we're following right now, including this one playing out in the Rose Garden of the White House. This is Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe holding a joint news conference today with President Obama. They are discussing a number of things, including this new Trans-Pacific Partnership the President has spoken so much about. Also the military cooperation, the new military cooperation between Japan and the United States. Another thing the White House is highlighting is the fact that both the U.S. and Japan are working to let more girls learn in school. At least that's what the White House is promoting. We also do expect the President to perhaps take some questions today, and we do expect those questions to center on what is taking place in Baltimore today. We heard from the governor a short time ago saying that he does think he has things under control. The National Guard has been called out there to the streets, but utter chaos and rioting and looting in the streets of Baltimore last night following the funeral of Freddie Gray. But again, this is at the White House today. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe speaking, and we will bring you back to that if they do discuss Baltimore.
I don't believe the trial will do anything because there's a bigger judge after all this. So I would have loved to have seen him just get life in prison and move on with our lives, and I think it'd take a lot of heartache away. And again, that's easy for me to say because I have my daughter right now.
Well, that is a father whose daughter survived the Batman theater shooting in Aurora, Colorado. The trial now underway. Two versions of James Holmes are being presented. The prosecution, a sadistic but sane gunman capable of mass murder. The defense, they say, a mentally ill schizophrenic man incapable of making reasoned decisions. We welcome you in here again, John Bachman with Miranda Kahn. And let's bring in our roundtable to discuss the trial in Colorado. We have criminal defense attorney Jeffrey Nathan, and also with us here on the set is Bob Harvey, chief instructor of the South Florida Gun School. It's great to have both of you guys with us here today. Jeff, first, let's begin with you. What does it take to actually reach this insanity defense, and do you think it will work considering the details we already know about this case?
In order for a jury to find a defendant criminally insane, the jury has to believe that at the time of the commission of the offense, that due to mental disease or defect, the defendant was unable to appreciate the wrongfulness of his conduct, or as a result of such defect, was unable to conform his acts to the reasonable norms of society. And as a consequence, is it going to work in this matter? I don't think so. This defendant actively planned out a mass murder. He protected himself with body armor, and then to boot, he booby-trapped his apartment so when they come to get him, everyone would be killed. That's just too much for a jury to believe. It's not going to happen. Has it happened? Yes, but not in this particular matter, in my opinion.
Harvey, let's bring you in on this conversation right now. So we mentioned earlier during our headlines that there were actually two different tests that were performed on James Holmes that found him to be sane at the time that this attack took place. And we've also heard reports that Holmes actually studied brain disorders before this mass murder. So are the odds looking against him?
I don't think that an insanity plea is going to work here. It was too well thought out and too well planned. This is a case of a sick mind, but I'm not so sure that it's insanity.
And Bob, we've often talked about the lack of funding available for folks who have mental issues, and this is when we hear about gun violence like this could be, even though he might not reach that insanity plea, but a good example of why these folks like James Holmes don't have the help they need.
John, let me stop you 1 second. I hate that term, gun violence. This was not gun violence. This was a human being who went off the deep end and became a mass murderer.
His primary weapon, though, in this attack were firearms.
It could have just as easily been a truck full of explosives.
It could.
The biggest mass murder that we've had in this country happened out in Oklahoma, and it wasn't done with a gun.
It's a fair point, but this particular case we're talking about here.
He used a gun as his weapon. There'd be a different weapon of choice in a different situation. Yes, he drove past 5 places that were movie theaters that were closer to his home that didn't have no guns allowed signs.
So Jeffrey, let's ask you now, do you think that guns or gun laws are part of the problems, or do you think this man would have committed violence no matter what weapon he chose to use?
Well, on the one hand, I'd like to see more firearms available to our citizens of the United States who prove that they're qualified to handle a firearm, and as a consequence, in such a scenario as the movie theater shootings, they'd be able to take some action against a shooter. But conversely, to make it possible for individuals with mental illness to have firearms is an inordinate mistake. So I think we're doing some good things to ensure background checks for individuals who have a mental disease or defect, so they've been committed to a state institution and the state knows that they're unsafe to pack. But you can't just restrict firearms just because you don't like acts of violence that occur in a movie theater. I'm sorry. Right. These are just bad events from sickos, and there's always going to be sickos, and the way you take care of them is to treat them early in their disease and not afterwards to kill them by execution.
All right, Jeffrey, we're running out of time, but we've got to talk a little bit more about this. We're going to see if you can stick around, and we're going to continue this conversation because we believe it warrants a little bit more discussion. We'll be back right after.